Sitzen oder?
He's speaking now. Everybody. Lang bleibt hier.
Gut.
Lang bleibt hier.
Dieses Ding ist in der Krieg.
לא לשכוח לכבוד. כן, חיבוקי. רפי מינות. אישה גדול לא.
She's a real person.
The shir will start in a couple of minutes. There's a small delay.
Who you video way to?
Hmm?
Who you're Skyping to?
The whole world.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Judge. 1 second at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Does it work? Okay. 2 more minutes.
So,
No, I know. Like a young custody couple.
איך היה בעל הבית פה?
You turn right, This got other side. Right, and it's not. No, because I had to buy a house, my kids were still in house.
I have the pleasure of inviting Harav Jacobson. We had the pleasure of hearing the Rav this Shabbos twice, and 3 times as a Chazoke. That means the Rav has to come back again.
Kann sitzen, ja?
Kann es.
Am Kolgam Aved. Oh, wow, Mamash the Schweiz. Kol Aved. Okay. Thank you very much, Rabbi, and welcome everybody. The good thing about this drasha is we know that it has an end time. Right? That's the good thing about it. Even though the Rabbi said that Ma'ariv is going to be when I finish, Ma'ariv will be when Ma'ariv is. So when is Taka the time for Ma'ariv? So it's just
the next week.
Very good. You remember. So a few years ago, I was invited to a Torah Masorah President's Conference with Israel in Aventura. And there was Motzei Shabbos session, and there were a lot of speakers.
Including me.
And by the time I got up, it was Karev to Chatzos Halayla. And it was after a long Shabbos, I realized that it's a difficult matzav. So I told the Olam, I said, I'll tell you a story. There was once I was once invited to Montreal to a dinner, and it was a Sfardish dinner. The Sfardim could be later than the Hasidim, right? Syrians. So by the time it came my turn, it was already midnight. And I looked at the crowd and I told the rabbi who invited me, I said, it's Rachmanas and the Olam. He said, no, I brought you here to give you a speech. So I got up and I said, listen, I'll tell you a story. There was a fellow who got up to speak once, and I forgot the joke.
I'm talking, everyone here, the crowd left.
A guy spoke and he went on and on. He didn't know when to end, so half the crowd left. At the time, he went on weiter. Another 20% left. He went on another hour, everybody left, besides one person. So he says to himself, finally a person who appreciates me. So he goes on another hour. Finally he finishes, he goes over and he says, you really appreciate my genius? He says, no, actually I wasn't listening. So he says, why do you stay till the end? He said, I'm the next speaker. So I told the crowd, I said, I have bad news and good news. The bad news is I'm the next speaker. The good news is that I'm the last speaker. So everybody calmed down and we did what we had to do. But be'emes, wie viel Segen ist Ma'ariv?
10:06.
Huh?
10:06.
10 noch 6?
6 noch 10.
6 noch 10. Okay. Very good. So first of all, welcome everybody, and thank you for gracing us with your presence. I know it's been a long and exhausting day for many, and the truth is that I want to begin with thanking the Hanhala of Kempinski for a beautiful, beautiful stay. Thank you very much. I want to thank Rabbi Wagner and his mishpacha for their beautiful leadership and making it such an amazing place. The Gashmias, the Baruchnias, for myself, my family, and all of us, and of course the Rabbi, the legendary. To remember the Gabai's name, you just have to remember that his son's name is Reb Shimon ben Yochai. So that's how you remember the Gabai's name. So I want to thank you very, very much, and thank everybody for giving us the ambiance and the atmosphere, not only of Switzerland and of St.Moritz and of Kempinski, but also of the Jewish people of Yiddishkeit. I went today up one of the mountains, so I reminded myself, there's a Mishnah Pirkei Avos, and those of you who will be here for a few days, it's good to remember there's a Mishnah Pirkei Avos, Perek Gimel, Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Mahalach b'derech, Mishoyne, Umafsik Mishnase v'oimer, Mano ilon zeh, Mano nir zeh, Ma'ilav ha'kosav kilim eschayev b'nafshe. Somebody's taking a hike in St.Moritz, and he's learning. Is it the learned, or state the learned, or a kletter to learned with AirPods, or with his chavrusa, or with his wife, whatever it is? And you interrupt your learning and you say, what a beautiful landscape, what a beautiful tree. So the Torah considers it as though he's endangering his life. It's a very strange Mishnah. What did the person do? He's learning, he's taking a hike, Mahalach b'derech, yeah, and he's up one of the mountains. He stands by one of the lakes and he says, give a cook, Mano nirzeh. What's the Gewalt? What's the Größe Gewalt? It's difficult to understand. He's endangering his life. Not only that, Chazal were besaken brachas for certain things that you see in nature. Mesachas brachas at the end, the last perek, different things are Yamagadol, different phenomena that you see, different types of creatures, different mountains, different scenes. There's brachas that you make. In fact, every morning, Psukkah de Zibra, we speak about Hallelu, Hashem Minaretz, Taninim, Eish, Uvarat, Shelet, Vekiter, Haharim, St.Moritz, no? Chol Gvoyas, St.Moritz, Eitzpri, Kol Harazim, Achayev, Chol Behema, Remes, Tzipirkanov, Malchei Eretz. I don't know if that's Biden or Bennett, whatever. No, Malchei Eretz or whatever, you'll figure that out. But you're praising Hashem. David HaMelech himself, in Tehillim, dedicated many chapters, including Baruchi Nafshi, to discuss the extraordinary beauty of nature. What's the Mischayev B'Nafshe? There's a beautiful, beautiful pshat I once saw in the Chassidische Sefer. It's a beautiful pshat. He says, it's one word. Mahalach b'derech, you're hiking, v'shoyne, you're learning, u'mafsik mimishnasai. You interrupt your learning and you say, how beautiful is this world. In this Jew's mind, the celebration of nature is an interruption of learning. There's two worlds. There's a world of Torah, and then there's the real world. There's the world of Torah, and then there's the world of nature. It's not Blat Gemara, and then there's St. Moritz. It's two separate worlds. Right? Now I stop my learning, and now we're going to celebrate life. That's Mischayev B'Nafshe. In Judaism, there's no duality. There's no dichotomy. There's no absolute Chetzi L'Hashem, Chetzi L'Chem, and it's over. Baal Shem Tov once said, Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher yitzesi eschem eretz Mitzrayim liyos lachem le'elokim. The Lachem is Eich le'elokim. The Lachem is also divine. Einay Mulvada. Not separate. There's a vision at Savart. Beautiful word from the Alta Vision Rebbe. In Shabbos, there's a halacha. Ein Kiddush ela b'makom seuda. What does that mean? You make Kiddush in the place where you eat. Yeah, if I make Kiddush here, then I go to the dining room to eat. I have to make Kiddush again, unless I started to eat here. But spiritual, it's a Gemara in Pesachim, it's halacha in Shulchan Aruch, Ein Kiddush ela b'makom seuda. But he said it means something deeper. Ein Kiddush ela b'makom seuda means the only Kiddush, the only Kedusha that counts is the Kiddush that enlightens and elevates the Makam Seuda, the meal. Sometimes you have a person in Shul or Yeshiva or Beis Medrash, they're very holy. They close their eyes, they scream, Kadosh, 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 Nagdishach, Nakadesh, Kesed, whatever the nusach is. But then when it comes to real life, to Makam Seuda, suddenly I can become a shark. I come into the office, suddenly I lose my humanity. So the Gemara says, Ein Kiddush ela b'makom seuda. By Judaism, there's no kedusha. We're not going as kedusha if it's not b'makom suda, if it doesn't uplift, if it doesn't sublimate, if it doesn't enlighten and inspire the place of the party, the place of the feast, the food, the kitchen, the dining room, the bedroom, the vacation, the intimate, physical, financial, personal life of the person. There's no mafsik b'mishnasei. It's all oneness. Why you have to interrupt your learning to celebrate life? There's a Jew sometimes, Torah is good for the heavens. Then in the real world is the real world. That's the Mischaya Benafsha. That's my Hagdama, Lekovid, Switzerland, the Schweiz, which is known for its splendorous nature. It's all one. Lios, Lochem is Oich, Leilekim. There's no duality, there's no dichotomy. Everything is one. Everything is part of oneness. So, there's a medrash, it's known as a medrash pliya. Medrash pliya means those medrashim that at a simple glance, it's hard to understand. It says as follows. We say every morning from Tehillim, Boine Yerushalayim Hashem, Nidche Yisrael Yechanas. Hashem builds Yerushalayim. He will gather Nidche Yisrael, the scattered ones. The Tishprei Tehi, the Jews that are scattered, the Nidche. They say it's a spread, but the ganze Welt. They're scattered all over the world. He's going to gather them together. So the Medrash says as follows: Afal pi sheboyni Yisrael Hashem, nidchi boyni Yerushalayim Hashem, nidchi Yisrael Yechanas. It's a question and an answer. It's not a statement. Even though Hashem builds Yerushalayim, still He's going to bring in the Jewish people. What's the Afal pi? The Medrash doesn't explain. Even though Afal Pi still Nidchi Yisrael Yechanas. What's the Hava in the why would you think not? The Medrash doesn't explain. It's called a Medrash Pliya. Medrash Pliya. So I want to tell you an insight I heard on this Medrash once. But in order to appreciate it, I'm going to give an introduction. In Diktuk, Hebrew grammar is very precise. Boine Yerushalayim Hashem is Lashon Hoiva. Nidchi Yisrael Yechanas is Lashon Asid, right? One is in present tense, one is in future tense, which doesn't really, you shouldn't write a sentence like that. Either it's Yivne Yerushalayim Hashem Nidchi Yisrael Yechanes, or Boine Yerushalayim Hashem Nidchi Yisrael Mechanes. Both in present tense or both in future tense. No, the beginning is future, the beginning is present, and the rest is future. That's what was disturbing the Medrash. Something is off here. So the Medrash says, Afal Pisha Boine Nidchi Yisrael Yechanes. What's the meaning of this? The Gemara says in Maseches Tainis, Daf Chav Tes, the last page of Maseches Tainis. Tana Rabbanon, Kol HaMis'abel Al Yerushalayim, Zoiche V'roye B'simchas. Anyone who grieves, Emetzel was clucked. You mourn for Yerushalayim, you merit, and you see the joy of Yerushalayim. So the Chassam Sofer, Joshua Chassam Sofer asks a question. He says, here you have the same problem. It should have said, Kol HaMis'abel Al Yerushalayim, Yiske V'yire B'simchasa, not Zoiche V'roye B'simchasa. Whoever mourns for Yerushalayim will see the joy. You're mourning now. We're mourning now. Yiske V'yire B'simchasa. That's what the Gemara says. Zoiche V'roye B'simchasa. You Zoiche and you see the Simcha now. But you don't. You're grieving for Yerushalayim. It's a time of Avelos. We fasted today. We didn't have Purim and Simchas Torah today. We fasted. Those who could fasted. But it was a time. It's a Yom Tainus. Starts Bein HaMetzarim. It's not the Zoiche V'roye Yiske V'yire B'simchasa. That's his question. For the ADDs here, I'm going to change the topic again. Don't worry. Every 12 seconds, I do a new topic. That's why people like it. So you with me? We started off with Mafsik Mishnasa. You remember St.Moritz? Ein Kiddush Alav Malkim Suda. Chetzi L'Hashem. There's L'Chem L'Lekid. Boy Nid Yerushalayim Hashem Medrash Pliya. Amr Kala Masaba Yerushalayim. Next. There's a Gemara in Maseches Brachas. Daf Chav Ches. Daf Koyach. The Gemara describes the death of Rabbi Yochanan, the passing of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Who was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the leader of the Sanhedrin during the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash in the year 70. So the Gemara says he fell ill. He had a very long life, 120 years. He fell ill. When he was sick, his students came to visit him. They saw that he was crying. They asked him, why are you crying? So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, Eini yodeya be'eze derech melichinos. When you come to the next world, there's two paths. The path of Gan Eden, the path of Gehenna, purgatory and paradise. I don't know which path I'm going to. So I'm crying. Hey, how can I not cry? A few minutes later, he told his students, Panu Mokoim L'Chizkiya Melech Yehuda. Make a seat for Chizkiya Melech Yehuda. Chizkiya, the king of Yehuda, he's coming. And he passed away. Yochanan ben Zakkai passed away. All the Mefarshim struggle. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai really thought he's going to go to Gehenna. If he's not going to Gan Eden, who's going to Gan Eden? There's an expression in Gemara when Rabbi also brachas. Rabbi said, I'm not Beinani, I'm a Beinani. I'm a lo Yabayah, lo Shavik Mar Chaya l'chol Beria. If you're a Beinani, if Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is not going to Gan Eden, who's going to Gan Eden? He was the Nasi of the generation. He was the Gadol Ador. He really thought he's ending up in Gehenna. It's a very strange Gemara. He says, I don't know, maybe I'm going to Gehenna. Why would he go to Gehenna? The Gemara says about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, 40 Arbayim Shana Lamat, Arbayim Shana Limed, Arbayim Shana Pirnis as Yisrael. 40 years he learned, 40 years he taught, and 40 years he led Klal Yisrael. Such a person goes to Gehenna. So who's Gan Eden made for? Who's Gan Eden made for? But he says, Eini Yedei Echveistash. Also very strange to understand. You know, sometimes when a person before they pass away, they have a flashback of their whole life. Sometimes when people are in danger, they look back at their whole life. It takes a few seconds. You see everything like a video. Sometimes a person lived a good life. But there's one thing that happened in your life, and it drives you crazy. And when you make a cheshbon hanefesh, sometimes that thing jumps out at you, and you can't come back to yourself. Sometimes a person is a good person. They lived a good life. There was one thing they did, or maybe one thing they didn't do. One thing. Nobody may even know about it, but they know about it. Maybe two things, maybe three things. It's not a bad person, a good person. But they were at a crossroads and had to make a decision. Everybody knows, everybody's sitting here. Some people have been around the block many times, many more times than I have been around the block. When I'm a baby. But you've been around the block, you know people make decisions, and sometimes years later you ask yourself, it's not so simple. Could be with yourself, could be with your spouse, could be with your children, with your grandchildren, could be with your community, could be something that affects it. It's not so simple. And the more responsibility you have, the more questions you have. Life is not easy. So, once you're to Hashif Rabbi Yashaber Soloveitchik, he said that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai at his deathbed was thinking about one thing. He knew that he had a good life. He didn't think he's going to get him. He was a mushchas, a low life, a ganav, a god. It was one thing that happened. And this, he couldn't forgive himself. He didn't know what happened. The Gemara says in Gittin, Daf Nun Zayin, the fifth Perek of Gittin, the famous story. Vespasian, Aspasianus, became the emperor of Rome. He succeeded Nero. In history is known as Nero. So Jewish in secular history say Nero committed suicide. The Gemara in Gittin says something else happened to him. In the Roman version is he committed suicide. But the Gemara says that Nero decided that he likes the Jewish people. So he was replaced by Aspasianus, by Vespasian. Vespasian had a son, Titus. Vespasian was the commander-in-chief that was sent by Nero to suppress the revolt in Judea in the year 66. 3,336, the revolt broke out. And Aspasianus came to crush it. In the meantime, Nero was gone, so Vespasian became the emperor, and he sent his son Titus to crush the revolt. He crushed it successfully, and he destroyed the Beis HaMikdash on the 9th of Av. The question is if it was 68 or 69 or 70. It's a machlekes, one of those 3 years. Gimel Alofim Tov Chav Ches, Tov Chav Tes, or Tov Lamed in the Jewish calendar. 3,338, 39, or 28, 29, or 30. 28, 29, 30. The secular calendar, 68, 69, 70. Most historians say it was the year 70. 4 years, they crushed the revolt, and Yerushalayim was gone. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lived in Yerushalayim. So the Gemara says in Gittin that he sneaked out of Yerushalayim. His nephew helped him. He made believe he was dead. They didn't let anybody go out because the Kanoim, the Sikrikon, the Zealots, decided they're going to fight Rome. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai didn't want to fight Rome. He didn't feel the Jews could win. So he wanted to make peace with Rome. But they fought Rome, and that's why there was a revolt. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai went on and he met Vespasian. Vespasian was very impressed by him. And he was so impressed by him, he told Rabbi Yochanan, whatever you want, I'll do. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked for three things. What three things? Number one, he wants a doctor for the tzaddik. The tzaddik fasted 40 years. You could see the bones in his neck. He wants a doctor for him. The second thing is, shushilta the Rebbe Gamliel. Don't murder the dynasty of Rebbe Gamliel, because that's the dynasty of Hillel, dynasty of David HaMelech, dynasty of Malchus Beis David of Mashiach. It should be that dynasty alive. The third thing is, 10 li Yavna v'chachama. Yavna is 15 miles from Yerushalayim. Spare Yavna. Don't destroy Yavna. The yeshiva moved to Yavna, the Sanhedrin moved to Yavna. Let them be, let them learn, let them continue. Aspasianus said, Gesundheit. He let him have all three. When Rabbi Akiva heard about this, Rabbi Akiva said, Meishiv chachamim acher. Sometimes the Rebbeinu Shalom takes the mind of brilliant people and turns it backwards. Aspasianus likes you. You could have asked him for the Beis HaMikdash. You could have asked him for Yerushalayim. Tell him to make a bout face and go hike back to Rome. A moment of grace. You could have saved the moment. Instead, you ask for a shtibel in Yavna. It's very nice. You lost the moment. The Gemara says some people say it was Rabbi Yosef, not Rabbi Akiva. It's not like this. But Akiva or Rabbi Yosef. So Rabbi Yosef said on his deathbed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, maybe I'm going to go to Gehenna. Maybe for this I'm going to go to Gehenna. I was given the opportunity to save Yerushalayim, to save the Beis HaMikdash. And I failed. I failed my people at that moment. Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai felt, the Gemara says, Tafasta meruba, like Tafasta. Some will say, Bismishige, get out of my office. Atkan. Atkan Akafa Aleph. I'm not giving you no Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. Yavna, B'Seidim, Tzaddik, fine. Gamliel, fine. That was his machshava. But sometimes you have to be bold. You have to ask. They say, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. Yeah? Emet, Rabbi Yechai. Emet. If you ask, it's 50% no. Right? 50% no. But if you don't ask, it's 100% no. So he thought maybe he's wrong. Maybe he single-handedly, indirectly, caused Churban Yerushalayim. So he said, maybe I will go to Gehenna. For that decision, what happened? Chizkiah Melech Yehuda arrives. Who's Chizkiah Melech Yehuda? Was Chizkiah Melech Yehuda? Why not Avram Avinu? Chizkiah was a fine man. What's up with Chizkiah? The answer is, Chizkiah saved Yerushalayim from Sancheriv. Sancheriv exiled the 10 tribes, and he came to exile the Shvatim in Yerushalayim. And Chizkiah stood up to him. The whole story in Tanakh is people didn't want it. They wanted to surrender. But Chizkiah stood up to Sancheriv, and there was a pandemic, so the shtickle corona, and 180,000 troops of Sancheriv died, first night of Pesach, and Yerushalayim was spared through Chizkiah. So Chizkiah came to escort Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. What was Chizkiah telling Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai? He was telling him, you're not going to Gehenna, don't worry. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai didn't know any idea. But we do know. How do we know? Because we live almost 2,000 years later. What do they say? Hindsight is 20/20. And we know not only did Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai not cause the destruction of Klal Yisrael, he saved it. Because he understood that without a Beis HaMikdash, the Jewish people may survive, may not survive. Without Yerushalayim, they may survive, they might not survive. But if they don't have Yavna v'Chachameha, if they don't have Torah, for sure they won't survive. So when he told us, Basyanis ten Yavna v'Chachameha, he actually, this is the Chiddush, he had the Roman emperor sign his own death sentence. Aspasianus didn't realize what he was doing. He thought he's leaving a kleiner shtibel, they're going to learn Torah. What is he? Big deal. He didn't realize that at that moment, he himself is signing the death sentence of Rome. Because if you look 2,000 years later, where's Rome? Where's Vespasian? Where's Titus? Some of you went to Rome. So you can see a Shar Titus is the portal of Titus. That portal was engraved when Titus came home from Yerushalayim They brought the Jewish thing, that's why they made a picture. If you go to Rome, you see the Jews and slaves and shackles carry the menorah and other kalim. This was engraved, I think, around 72. After Titus came back, his march of victory, they made that shire for Titus. That's what's left of him. So where's Vespasian? Where's Caligula? Where's Adrian? Where's Pompey? Where's Tiberius? Where's Julius? If you know a little bit Roman history, where are they? And the answer is they're in Wikipedia. They're all in Wikipedia. That's where they are. And now the question is, where's the Jewish people? And the answer is we made Wikipedia and Google and Facebook and Waze and Instagram and Telegram and other Meshuggahgrams. We made it. If you want, you can take out your phone now and you can go to Wikipedia and you can edit. You can edit the Nebuchadnezzar, Titus, Aspasionis, Haman, Parah. We write their obituaries. We write all their obituaries. Not only you can edit it, we don't only like editing our enemies on Wikipedia, we also like eating them. So we took Parah and we turned them into a matzah ball, a knedel. We took Antiochus and we turned them into a latke. We took Haman and we turned them into a hamantash. We don't only like to defeat our enemies, we want to eat them. We want that our fat, it's always carbs. Knedlach, hamantash, and latke, always carbs. We want our cholesterol, our fat reserve should be built up by Antiochus, by Parah, by Vespasian, by Haman. I was once speaking, opening a mikveh in Flatbush near Brooklyn College. So the president of Brooklyn College was there. She's a fine Irish woman, an intellectual, very fine person. So it was Hanukkah time, so everybody was eating donuts and latkes. So she says, Rabbi, why do you eat so many latkes and donuts? So she was Irish. I didn't think that the answer that we give in yeshiva would work for her. That because the oil was supposed to burn for one night, but it burned for 8 nights, so therefore we soak the donut in oil for 8 years, and the latkes in oil for 80 years, and then we eat it 8 a minute, in order for the candle, because the candles burnt for 8 days. For Jews, it's a perfect mathematics. The oil burned for 8 days in the Beis Hamikdash. Of course, we should eat donuts for 8 years, no question. But I didn't think for the Irish that mathematics would work, so I needed a simpler answer. So I told her, I said it's very simple. Hanukkah represents the victory of the Jews against the Greeks. The Greeks were into 4 things: looks, fashion, sports, Olympics. So on Hanukkah, we eat all this food to make sure that we never, ever, ever look like them. She says, wow, that's very deep. Is that from the Kabbalah? She went, no, it's from the Kabbalah. I said, it's not from the Kabbalah, but it's from experience. Aber das hat sie verstanden. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai understood this. He understood that Jews need to bring a sheep every morning and every afternoon to the Beis Hamikdash. Without it, it's going to be difficult. They won't have an epicenter. They won't have a spiritual epicenter. They won't have their own country, their own army, their own sovereignty, their own malchus, their own spiritual center. But he knew, without Masechta Brachas, without Masechtas Vachim Menachas Chulim Pchayres Erkin Tmura Krisis, without the learning about the carbon tamid, about the carbon oil, about the shlum, about the ashim, about the chatas, without that, the Jews could never stay alive. So he says, Ten li yavna v'chachamel. And Chizkiah came to escort him and said to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, you're not going to Gehenna. You saved the Jewish people. And you see the fact. The fact is, people often, today we live in a generation of achdus. You have to bring together Klal Yisrael. It's been many generations that everybody was doing their own thing. People couldn't get along with each other. You see that today it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work. It's not the way to bring Mashiach. Everybody has to work together. It's called cross-pollination. Right? Like here in Kempinski, you have everybody together. You learn to tolerate each other, to respect each other. Relationship to Israel was always a complicated relationship. This group, that group, that group. But the fact remains, whatever anybody wants to say, the fact that after 2,000 years, almost 6.6 million Jews today are living in Eretz Yisrael. That's a big number, and it's a very special number. It's a very holy number. 6.6 million. Think about that number. Not 6 million, but 6.6 million. Came back to Eretz Yisrael. How did it really happen? So it happened through so many different ways. But the fact is that if Jews for 2,000 years would not be learning Hilchas Meisers, Hilchas Meiser Rishon, Hilchas Trumas, Kedushas Mechitzes, Kedushas Yerushalayim, Pigul, Noiser, Tmura, They weren't learning the halachas of Bayis Rishon and Bayis Sheni, and the kedusha of Kodesh Kadoshim and Kachim Kalim, and the avodah of the Koyanim and the avodah of the Leviim. There would be no memory around. There was a professor in Harvard, his name is Danny Goldhagen. Danny Goldhagen wrote a book called Hitler's Willing Executioners. Very interesting book, sad book. His theory is, don't blame the Holocaust on the Nazis. The Holocaust is all of Germany. It's not a comfortable book, certainly not in Switzerland, the Hagolil, but that's his theory, and he did it 10 years research. He says, don't blame it on the SS and on Hitler. Of course, they led it, but he says all of Germany, most of Germany was very happy. So he went for a book tour in Germany, and I read an article in the New York Times about it. So in Berlin, there was a big debate between him and a Berlin professor. The Berlin professor turns to him and says, Professor Goldhagen, the Holocaust happened more than 7 decades ago. Don't you think it's time for the Jewish people to forget and move on? That's what he tells them. A chutzpah of a professor. So Goldhagen, who's a Jewish boy, not a boy anymore, was once a Jewish boy, still a Jewish boy for his mother. Goldhagen says, listen, my friend, let me tell you about my people. He says, 1,934 years ago, we had a building on a mountain, and it got burnt. You know how many times a day we mention it? 64 times a day. 64 times a day we mention a building that existed on a mountain in Jerusalem. 64 times a day. You can look through all the tefillas and Berchas Hamazon. 64 times a day we mention the Beis HaMikdash. So he says, we're not going to forget 6 million Jews so fast. We're not going to forget them. That's what he said. The guy was quiet. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he kept the memory alive through Torah. And because of that, he defeated Aspasianus. We're here. Some Sofer says, that's Pshat in the Gemara. Kol hamis'abel al Yerushalayim zoicha v'roye b'simchas. Not Yiske, zoicha. Why? The Gemara said, the Medrash asks in Bereshis Rabbah, Parsha Peidalet Vayeshev, when Yosef disappeared, so it says, Vayimo'el Yisnachim. Yaakov could not get comforted. So Chazal say, why not? Why not? And for Chazal, family Rashi brings it, Zeira al hameis sheyishtakach min alei v'lo el achai. Hashem made it when somebody chas v'shalom passes away, even if we don't forget, but there's a human mechanism that people are resourceful. They move on. That's not easy. You don't forget. People move on. But if somebody's alive, that mechanism doesn't exist. So Yaakov couldn't move on. There could be no nechama because Yosef was alive. So the Chaim Sofer says as follows. He says it doesn't make sense. The Beis HaMikdash was burned 2,000 years ago. Yerushalayim was destroyed 2,000 years ago. It's time to move on. It's time to 2,000 years. Come on, you're a creative people. Jews are a creative people. We don't like to sit and wallow in despair. Move on. You don't do Avelis for 2,000 years. What's Pshat? Pshat is it's not a mace, it's a chai. If it would be a mace, it's not a mace, it's a chai. So a mele, it's not mishtakich, it's not dead, it's alive. Jewish history is not dead, it's alive. So some Sofer writes this. Today we know this, it's true in genetics. There was a professor at Mount Sinai, there is a professor, her name is Professor Rachel, Professor Rachel. She interviewed 40,000 children of Holocaust survivors. So people sitting in this room would be eligible. She wanted to see if the trauma of the Holocaust affected the genes or not. Is it just a memory? She coined a very famous term today in science called epigenetics. It's her term, which basically says that you carry in your genes and you pass on in your genes not just the color of hair or your metabolism or your height or your physiological structure or components, that too. But in your genes, you have absorbed all experiences of life. So that means my child can be dealing with a trauma of my Elter Zayda, my Elter Baba, or me. Why? Didn't happen to him. He doesn't know about it because it's in the gene. This means that in our genes, we carry every experience of the Jewish people. positive and also negative. So when you talk about the Jewish people today, the Gemara says in Hori is Daf Hey, Tzibur loy meis. Klal Yisrael doesn't die. An individual could pass away, but Klal Yisrael doesn't die. So we are the people, we carry the genes of Yotzei Mitzrayim, the people who stood at the Yam Suf, Ma'amad Har Sinai, those who were by Chanukah, by Purim, by the Binyan Beis Hamikdash Harishon, Hasheni, by the Churban. We carry their faith, their wisdom, their resilience, their Mesiras Nefesh, their Amunah, their Chachma, their Avos Hashem, their Avos Yisrael, their Avos HaTorah. We also carry some of their trauma. And actually, it seems like in this generation, it's all coming out, which explains why things are happening and nobody understands what's happening with the youth. In my opinion, it's a lot of it is epigenetics. And it's an incredible thing because you see that the kids are dealing with things that are beyond what they should be dealing with when they're growing up, either in Zurich or in Muncie or in Lakewood or Williamsburg or in Monroe or in Toronto, Chicago, Pittsburgh. Find communities, find people, or in Borough Park or in Crown Heights, wherever they are, things that are coming out that I think are often inexplicable unless you understand how epigenetics works. So the Chassam Sofer says, Kol HaMis'abel al Yerushalayim, Zoiche v'roye b'simchasa. The very fact that Jews fast Shavasa b'Tamuz, it's not Yiske, Zoiche. It means that Jewish eternity is alive and well. David Melech Yisrael Chai v'Kayam. That's why when we say Amokim Menachem Eschem B'Sert Shav Elitzim v'Yerushalayim Le'aleinu v'Le'alechem. What's the connection? Hashem should comfort you. What's the B'Sert Shav Elitzim v'Yerushalayim? What's the connection? Yes, he should comfort also Tzion Yerushalayim. Connection is three things. Number one, Tzion Yerushalayim is not an aveilus of one individual. It's all the Jewish people. Number two, Tzion Yerushalayim physically were destroyed, but not spiritually. Number three, Tzion Yerushalayim are going to come back. So we tell to every oval, every single oval, it's very powerful words. You have to remember three things. First of all, you're not the only one grieving. All the Jewish people are grieving. Some directly, some indirectly, some consciously, some subconsciously. Because it's limbs of one body. You amputate a limb, the whole body is affected. It's not one person in one family is affected. Everybody grieves. That's number one. Number two, I said Shabbos, for those who weren't here, Mrs. Sterbuch told me that Kempinski for many years didn't allow Jews here, even though it's named Kempinski Zayid. But you know how it works. In Palm Beach, they also used to have signs, no blacks, no dogs, no Jews. Today, Palm Beach is vet ungefit by Yidden. We eat the latkes, we eat the hamantash, we eat the matzah balls, the knedlach. At least Achron Shal Pesach, if you're careful and get brachas. So when they started to allow Jews here back, and you see there's a couple of Jews here now in Kempinski, with Minchel, Meide, philosophisch Getachnen. You understand the level, yeah? It's not only Jews are here, so it's mamash, creme de la creme de la creme. It's like beyond Schweiz, because in Schweiz would be unheard of, right? Okay. So in any case, so she asked them, what's the difference between Jews and non-Jews? They said Jews, after a few days, they're like family. Non-Jews, they can be here a few weeks, everybody remains isolated. So that's the Amokim Menachem Eschem, it's not individual. Number two, spiritually, a soul never dies. A soul lives forever. Just like Tzion Yerushalayim. And number three, there's going to be Tchias HaMeisim, just like Tzion Yerushalayim. That's why every Nechama is with Tzion Yerushalayim. So the Chassam Sofer says, it's not Yiske. It's Zoiche B'Roiv. That itself is powerful. The old story, the Napoleon, you know the story. Napoleon once in France, he went by a shul on Tisha B'Av, and he heard them crying, and they told the Rav said the story of Rachel Mavak al Banah, and he said that a nation that still can cry for a lost temple so many years later is going to see it again. He understood if Rachel, they're learning about Rachel Mavak al Banah. So that's what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai kept alive with Yavna v'Chachama. That spiritual core, that spiritual essence that can't be extinguished. Now, when the Gemara, based on all this, come back to Boini, remember what we did? You remember Boini Yerushalayim Hashem? That's why the Mishnah says, Mafsek v'Mishnaseh. Celebrate the world. but don't be mafsik with Mishnah. If Yochanan ben Zakkai said, "Ten li yavna v'chachamah," they can't be mafsik with Mishnah. So now we come to Bnei Yerushalayim Hashem. So I'm going to share with you an insight that was shared once by the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory. He used to make siyumim in Masechtas many times during the year on Shas or Masechta. This was on Ziyat Kislev. He made a siyum about Metzia. So he said, such a moving word. It's Bab Metzia of Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. The end of Bab Metzia. It's called Perek Habayis V'Aliyah. It's a Mishnah about real estate. So he learned the Mishnah and he explained it. The Mishnah says like this. It's an interesting situation. You have a bias and an aliyah. You have, let's say, a condominium. Let's say here in St.Moritz or in Zurich, people don't live in houses, they live in binyanim. So you have a bias. You have somebody who lives on the first floor, and you have an aliyah. You have somebody who lives on the second floor. That's what the Mishnah discusses. What happens? Naflu. There was a tsunami, there was an avalanche, there was a storm, there was an arson, whatever it is, the whole dira gets destroyed. So now what's supposed to happen? The person can't move into the second floor if the person on the first floor doesn't build, because he needs a floor, that's the roof. He needs pillars, he needs foundations. So he goes to the first person on the first floor. He says, listen, I need a house. The guy says, I decided to move to Miami. I had enough. 40 years in St. Moritz, I'm going to Miami. I'm not rebuilding my bias. He says, what am I supposed to do? He says, I don't care. It's my house. I'm not rebuilding it. What's it? So the Mishnah says, Amar Bala Aliyah Labalabayis Livnis, Vuene Reitz Livnis, Hare Bala Aliyah Boines Abayis, Vitar Besach. So if I own the second floor condominium, I can rebuild the first deer on the first floor. Move in there. I need a house. You don't want to rebuild your house. You want to move. Fine, you move. So I can rebuild your house and move in there. Oh, one day you come to St. Moritz and you like my job. You say, oh, I want back my house. So the Mishnah says, no problem. Just pay me the expenses I put into the house. Now, of course, when you say if the guy built the house, like Pissim and Amsis, like a Chashvedish, so then, we're talking about, he built the house normal. If he put an extra fine, but basically a regular Keminig Hamakim, Balabatish. So you have to pay me all my expenses. And now you could move into the first floor. And now I have the money and I can rebuild the second floor and I can move in back to my condominium. That's the halacha. That's also the halacha in Choshen Mishpat. I think in Shin Samachtes is the halacha in Choshen Mishpat. This Mishnah. It's clear. It seems very fair. You don't want to build. I build your house for you. I live there. If you want it back, give me my expenses. And then I can take the money and move. I can move to Florida or to Yerushalayim, or I can move back into this house. I can renovate it. That's the Mishnah Pipshat. Now let's go one step deeper. The Gemara says in Tainus that there's two Yerushalayim's. There's two Beis HaMikdashes. When Yaakov had his dream, he said, Achin yeshel akim b'makom hazeh, Achin yeshel akim b'makom hazeh v'anoichi lo yadati, v'zeh shar hashamayim. This is the portal to heaven. So the Gemara says, what's this is the portal to heaven? Beis HaMikdash shalamayla mechuven keneged Beis HaMikdash shalamata. In other words, there's a bias and there's an aliyah. There's two stories. There's the Beis HaMikdash physically. There's the physical Yerushalayim. It's called Yerushalayim Shalmato. There's also Yerushalayim Shalmayla. Where is that? It's not a physical Yerushalayim. It's a spiritual Yerushalayim, which is the aliyah. It's above the physical Yerushalayim. It's above the physical Beis HaMikdash. So habayis v'aliyah. There's a bias, a physical home for the Jewish people. It's called Yerushalayim, the Beis HaMikdash. And then there's the aliyah, the Zeh Shara Shemayim. There's a spiritual Yerushalayim Shalmayla. There's a Beis HaMikdash Shalamayla. And it's mechuven. It's mechuven. It's not the Beis HaMikdash Shalamayla is in Switzerland. The Beis HaMikdash Shalamayla is in Australia. Beis HaMikdash Shalamayla is parallel to the Beis HaMikdash Shalamayla. Beautiful. So we're two neighbors. I live in the first floor. You live above me. We get along. We have excellent relationships. We even eat by each other Shabbos and Yom Tov. We borrow from each other eggs and milk. We have a very good relationship. The Jewish people lived in Yerushalayim, Shalamata. The Rebbeinu Shalom lived in Yerushalayim, Shalamayla, and they had a wonderful situation. Then came Habayis V'Aliyah Shenoflu. Then came a Churban. The Bayis was destroyed, and the Aliyah was also destroyed. The Gemara says in Tainus Dafei Amar Rabbi Yochanan Nishba Kadosh Baruch She'enoi Nichnas LeYerushalayim Shel Ma'ala Ad She'yikansu Yisrael Yerushalayim Shel Mata. Hashem made an oath. He will not go in to the Yerushalayim above until the Jews don't go into the Yerushalayim below. He will not go into the Beis HaMikdash above until we're not in the Beis HaMikdash below. So if the Bayis was destroyed, the Aliyah was also destroyed. Lubavitcher Rebbe said, comes the Baal Aliyah to the Balabayas, and he says, do me a favor. I want to move into the Aliyah, build a house. Hashem comes to the Jewish people and says, I want to go back to the Aliyah, build a house. The Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva Perek Zayin, Ifticha Torah, Shesoif Yisrael Lasas Tshuva, V'soif Galusam U'miyad Hei Negolim. So Hashem says, build up the house, build Yerushalayim. Taisva says in Tainus Daf Yud, Yerushalayim is a combination of two words. Yira, Shalom. Rama Avinu named it Yira. Shem, Malki Tzedek named it Shalom. Hashem said, Leheve Kedem V'Chedem. We'll take two names. Yira, Shalom. Shlem was Hayira. So there's the physical Yerushalayim, there's a spiritual Yerushalayim. So the Rabbi Yerushalayim says, build up the Bayis, build Yerushalayim through Yiras Hashem, Yira Shalom through Tshuva, so I could go into the Aliyah. But the Balabayas says, I'm not interested. I'll find a new house. The Golus is long, and the Jewish people sometimes say, I have different priorities, I have different issues, I have different hopes, there's different isms, a lot of different isms outside of Judaism. I'm going to find a different home. Years pass. He said, the Baal Aliyah Benktzach, zurückkommen, Schritte begalusen, the Schritte is in Golus. He said an expression, er kann sich schon nicht einhalten. The Rebbeinu Shalom can't contain himself. So he says, I'm going to build it. You don't want to build it, I'll build it. I'll build it. And he builds up Yerushalayim so that he should be able to be in Yerushalayim. Oh, it's a nice Yerushalayim. The Jews say, I want to come back. I want to come back. What does the Mishnah say? No problem. I want all my expenses. He said, David Bitter. Here it's a difficult situation. Pay up all the Rebbeinu Shalom's expenses. That could be tough. Everything he put in. Zog the Medrash. Boine Yerushalayim Hashem nitchi Yisrael Yechanes. Afal pi shet boine Yerushalayim Hashem nitchi Yisrael Yechanes. Even though that he built Yerushalayim, the Baal Aliyah built Yerushalayim. So the Chayre, until you pay up every last penny, don't come back. I built the house. You don't come back. You didn't want to build it? Leave. That's why it's Loshen Hoiva and Loshen Asid. Boine is Loshen Hoiva. Nitche Yisrael Yechanes is Loshen Asid. I built it, says the Medrash. That's all when the Bayis and Aliyah are neighbors. But here, it's a father and a child. A father, a mother built the dinner for a child. Child says, I don't have all the expenses. I'll just go to Miami. No, it doesn't work that way. You come into my house. I don't know, but I'll tell you this is a fact. Did ever said this whole Torah, Yutas Kislev Tovshin Chavov. Yutas Kislev 1966. Literally 17 months later, what happened? Jerusalem was liberated. It's a Hafla Vela. This was Yutas Kislev Tovshin Chavov. Public had the Fabrengen. Very emotional. He said it very emotional. The Pechiyas was extremely emotional. 17 months later, and it wasn't part of the plan. If you know the history of 1967, this was not part of the plan. Moshe Dayan told Motke Gur, I don't need the headache of Jerusalem, the biggest headache. I have the Vatican on my head, Mecca on my head, the mosque on my head. Let Jerusalem stay by the Jordans, by the Jordanians. But they were still gewollt anders. It was unexpected. In fact, one Knesset meeting is known as the pajama meeting. It was Menachem Begin called it 3 o'clock in the morning. And they say everybody was in pajamas. Menachem Begin used to listen to BBC 12 o'clock a.m. He did it from the days when he was a fugitive. He would listen to BBC 12 a.m. And he kept on listening. He was in the opposition. Begin was on the opposition, he was on the right. Everything was the left. And he heard that tomorrow there's going to be a ceasefire. UN is going to make a ceasefire. So he called this meeting 3 o'clock in the morning, and he got permission for them to go into Yerushalayim. And the Jordanian king, King Hussein, didn't stop bombing, even though they told him, mix out, mix out, mix out. And I think it was 9 in the morning when he screamed, Gur screamed, Harabayit, b'yadeina. Ta'it tzarchan, lo? Tzarchan. Harabayit b'yadeina. It wasn't al pi derech hatefa. They didn't want it. They didn't want it. 17 months earlier, he said this Mishnah. That Rebbeinu Shalom sagt, ich geh boy in Yerushalayim. And I've been there, it hurt. Ich geh boy, he has a yeshiva right near the Kaisel. The Siv Aryeh. The Siv Aryeh? Right near the Kreitel Maravi, a few feet from the Kreitel Maravi. Remember his father's yeshiva? The Lozacher. אתה בשוויץ, 35 שנה צריכים לבקר בארץ ישראל, מה אתה? שוויצרישה? כן. So 18 months later, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, I'm giving! So you have to give all the yitzias. You don't have to give all the yitzias. But you have to show up. I'll conclude with this. The question is, why does my phone doesn't show it? Oh. Er gesagt, 10 mit 6 Minuten. Haben wir 8 Minuten. Für 8 Minuten. Richtig? Für 8 Minuten. Okay. When the Gemara describes the Churban, it says a very interesting and strange expression. It's all the same sugi with Aspasian and Sebechin and Bezak. Everybody knows the story. Kamsa. He wasn't invited to the party, and he came, and he was thrown out publicly, and he was shamed. And Kamsa went to Rome, and he told the Roman emperor, Mordu b'cha Yehudoi. There was a revolt. He says, prove it. Give me a calf as a carbon. They won't offer it. He made a mum. He made a blemish in the eye, in the eyelid. The lididan iu mum. Lididu leka mum. For them, it's not a mum. He brings it, and he knows the Jews won't be at Makriv. The Jews say it's coming from the Kaiser, from the Caesar. Well, Makriv, Pikuach Nefesh is doicha halachas of karbonis. Stood up Reb Zcharia ben Afkilis, who's one of the Tanoim, and he said, everybody's going to say, you're allowed to offer a blemished animal. We can't offer it. So they said, we have to kill this man, because he's going to go back to Rome. He's a Moser. He said, they're going to say that if you blemish an animal, you get the death penalty. So they didn't offer the animal. They didn't kill the man. And he went back to Rome and he said, there's a revolt. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, I quote, An vasnusoi shel Zcharia ben Afkilis, chriva es beiseinu, sorfes echaleinu, v'higla es baneinu. The anova, the humility, the piety of Zcharia ben Afkilis gave us the goals. So everybody asks, what's an vasnusoi? Where's the humility? What's the humility? You could say, he was following the law too much. Sometimes he can't follow the laws because either or be mad from the carbon. What's anvasnusa? Where's the humility of Chaim and Askelis? What's the anova? Maybe say tzitkusoi. He was a bissel. He was very frum. He was a kanoi. What's anvasnusa? It's an interesting child. So there's a lot of different pshatim. The Vilna Gaon has a famous pshat, but it's not fun. I want to tell you about from the Moirei Nayim, the Nachum Chernobyl. The Nachum of Chernobyl is a Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov. Passed away in Aleph Cheshvan Tovkuf on Ches, 1797. Chernobyl, Ukraine. The Nachum Chernobyl. The Nachum Tversky. Many of the Tverskys are his descendants. So he has a sefer called Moirei Nayim Yisamach. At the end is Likutim on Mesechus, and on Mesechus Gittin he has this word, and he says as follows. Very interesting idea. He says, Zcharia ben Afkilis was from the Gedolei Hadar. You see, they respected him. He had a vision, he had prophetic vision. And he saw the Beis HaMikdash is going to get destroyed. Kam tzaher, kam tzahin, kill him, don't kill him, be makriv of the calf, don't be amil lahir. It's all excuses, the way it happens. You know how God runs the world, this guy, they're not guilty. The Beis HaMikdash is going to be destroyed. It's going to happen. He saw it. He saw it. So he said to himself, Ein lonu shir ela Torah hazos. We're going to lose the Beis HaMikdash. What are we going to be left with? We're going to be left with Torah. So why should we be makriv a carbon that you're not allowed to be makriv to save the Beis HaMikdash? We're not saving anything. We're just going to be changing halacha. It's not like he thought you could change it. He realized you can't. So at least let's stick to Shulchan Aruch. A blemished animal, you're not allowed to bring on the Mizbeach. It comes from Rome, it comes from Rome. We don't change Shulchan Aruch because of Rome. Oh, kill the guy. You can't kill somebody for blemishing an animal. He's a massa, he's going to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. He saw it's going to be destroyed. So the Moreh Naim says, why didn't he tell that to the Olam? Anvasnusai. He was humble. He couldn't tell people, I know the future. He was humble, so he didn't say it. So the Moreh Naim says, so why are you blaming him? So he says, blaming him because he didn't realize the koyach for Yidden. If he would have told them what he saw, they could have changed it. He didn't realize this was a second humility. There's humility, I don't want to brag. There's another type of humility. I think I'm small. But Ditchabah says, Noach miktane amonahoya. It says Noach had a little amunah. What do you mean a little amunah? He built the table for 120 years. That's called little amunah. But Ditchabah says, Noach miktane amunah. He had little amunah in himself. He didn't believe that he could change something. Hashem said, I'm going to destroy the world. Okay, go ahead. Moshe, mechaini na mesifrecha. Erase me first. Mecheni is oisius mei Noach. Because it was a tikkun for Noach. And Vasnusish was Chayiv and Afkilis, he brings from the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov says as follows: the Beis HaMikdash gets destroyed not because of arrogance, but because of humility. And the Baal Shem Tov says, Keser Shem Tov oiskuf memeh. People don't realize their power. People become victims to perceived reality. And it's this type of victimhood that allows injustice to happen, allows criminals to get away with murder, allows a Beis HaMikdash to get destroyed because everybody looks in the mirror and says, Ich bin garnished, me and the Yamani. And if you don't believe me, ask my wife. If you don't believe my wife, ask the Shviga. If you don't believe the Shviga, ask the Shvet. If you don't believe the Shvet, ask the therapist. If you don't believe the therapist, ask everybody else. They'll all tell you, bist a garnished, bist an idiot, bist a fer, bist a benuvel, bist a dos, bist a jens. And vasnusoi. Sometimes the greatest destructions happens because people don't recognize their power, their creativity. There's a big cloud, you know, what am I, a guy? Fine, what everybody has. So I have this talent. I can give tzedakah, I can write, who am I? There's a lot of people. I run the world. I'm a sugar and a narcissist. It's not just a Beis HaMikdash, it's a mini Beis HaMikdash. Yeah, the kid is a Beis HaMikdash. Sometimes there's a child, I can save. There's a teenager, I can save. There's one school, there's one community, there's one situation, there's one thing where my heart, my soul, my creativity makes all the difference. Don't allow your humility to get in the way of your true greatness. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much. May we taka have zoiche v'roye b'simchasa v'chayil imheira b'yameinu. Amen. Thank you. Thank you. From where did you come? Sir. Verstanden? Verstanden? Aber es muss sein. Stel deine Gebeden. Kom maar een van mij. Tiel.
Did you tape them on your phone?
It's on YouTube. I think send the link.
Can you please send me the link? I think it was